Hello everybody, thank you for coming today. I'd like to talk to you about Mydex, what we do, what we stand for, how we're organised, what services we offer, also what we don't offer, and then to review some of the benefits specifically of our platform, how it operates and how we got here today. Just to start with a little bit of background about Mydex, we are a community interest company. Now that's like a normal company, but it's got some extra special obligations on it. We are legally chartered with a social purpose to work on behalf of individuals, human beings, to help them become empowered. And the way that we do that is through giving them control over their data, giving them the ability to capture it, to organise it, to share it, to review it, to understand it, and to be empowered in the insights about their life and give them the ability to get things done more efficiently. Now, in order to be a community interest company, you have to do some very special things. You have to sign away the assets of your business into an asset-locked enterprise. It means for the founders and the shareholders of the company, there is no flotation, there is no trade sale, there's no billion-dollar flotation at the end of it or being bought by somebody like Google. And the reason we did that, and the reason the founders decided to do it that way, was that we knew trust was absolutely paramount for people in how an organisation like this worked. And if people could see that the platform that Mydex represents was a trust framework, but it was legally structured in a way that it could never be acquired by a nation state or by a large corporation, but could only ever exist as a trusted platform devoid of any external commercial control. Now, it's not to say that Mydex doesn't want to make a profit, and it certainly needs to make a profit in order to develop the platform and enhance services and deliver one of its critical parts, which is education, to help individuals understand their personal data and how it's used. So one of the other legal obligations we have is that 65% of any profits we make as an organisation have to be reinvested in our social purpose. Now, that largely comes down to two key areas. One of them is the ongoing development of the trust framework, the platform itself, the functionality, the tools, the utilities for individuals. But we see increasingly a large part of it is in the education program, whether that's education for people that use Mydex as a service or whether it's just the general public, in getting them to appreciate and understand what personal data is, the risks to their identity, the risks and danger of personal data and how it gets shared, or the benefits that they can get from it. So we see over time educational bursaries coming out to have, one day we dream of a chair of personal data at some august university around the world helping people educate. But equally we see modern technology like YouTube with the Khan Academy providing education in real time to people, not only within our platform but anyone who needs it, and that's our social purpose. Our community is vast, it's humanity at the end of the day, it's individuals who need help and tools to make their business productive. So we're a trust framework that has a legal structure. It says everybody that participates knows what the rules are, that you can understand the behaviours, that you can enforce those behaviours. And in order to do that, we have invested heavily in various foundations and organisations like the Open Identity Exchange, where knowledge is transferred freely about managing identity at the internet scale. We're part of T-Scheme, which is one of the only European recognised assurance models around information and security around digital transactions. We recently completed company-wide certification for ISO 27001, which is an absolute milestone, and we've considered it essential as an external demonstration of our commitment to security and trust around the way the platform operates. I was with the Information Commissioner's Office recently, and they described the Mydex platform as having the potential to genuinely implement privacy by design. This is the first time it's possible for an individual to express what their needs and desires are about the use of their information, and also the ability to revoke the use of their information. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. We also sit and work on the My Data programme, which is sponsored by the Department of Business Innovation and Skills, and this is part of the consumer empowerment strategy, where they are working with private sector organisations to hand back the data that individuals hold. Individuals are provided to organisations, and the organisations are collected about individuals and hand it back to them. And one of the key requirements of that is to be certain you're handing it back to the right person, but also in a format that can be used and stored. And obviously what Mydex does enables that to happen, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. On top of that, we've been working around identity for a long while. We're part of the government ID assurance programme, and we're one of the 8 identity providers in the United Kingdom that has been authorised to provide identity services to the population of the United Kingdom, which we're very excited about, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But let's go back to the landscape that we're operating under. There are communities that we serve, the individuals fundamentally. What's the problem set that they're dealing with in their life? Well, they're overloaded by information. It comes in lots of different forms, it's poorly organised. Trying to make sense of your life and understand your life is quite complicated. Equally, who has not got multiple usernames and passwords and has to log in multiple sites to get things done and re-enter the same information again and again and again? It's simply not practical or not scalable. And this situation is only getting worse. So fundamentally, part of the challenge we looked at and how we could solve it for individuals is give them some tools that make that possible for them to address. Time that it takes to administer your life is growing. If you can get back that time, and the research we've done shows this is a hugely empowering part of existence. For organisations, they've got a whole series of problem sets, whether they are mobile phone companies, local authorities, or application developers developing on smartphone environments or whatever. They've all got issues around trust and confidence about, is my data being stored correctly? Are people using it for the right reasons? So trust is eroding between organisations and their customers at the end of the day. They've also got a huge operating cost around transactions. Transactions are terribly expensive. Simple things like it costs 40p to print and post a letter. In the Mydex platform, it's 4p a year, send as many as you like. So there are huge economic challenges these organisations are faced in terms of moving from what was the traditional world of brochureware on websites to paper-based or physical interactions with people to genuinely digitally transacting, and that's part of what we represent going forward. Analytics and insight about individuals is decreasing in terms of quality because the sparsity of the data that organisations have. People don't want to tick boxes and say, communicate with me. They don't want to fill in endless forms again and again. So all of these CRM strategies that people have come up with to understand your customer, get the mythological 360 view, simply don't work, because organisations cannot get people to participate, because we keep asking them to turn up to their portal or to their office or to fill in yet another form, and people are tired and exhausted and don't want to do that. So they're the underlying problem sets that we're addressing. Now, if you're an organisation that's working with Mydex, this is what we see them asking for repeatedly, and we've summarised it into 3 areas and different emphases for people. They're looking for identity services. How many people have to turn up again and register for another username and password? Organisations don't want that responsibility. There are huge complexities around it. Mydex addresses that by giving individuals a Mydex ID which is under their control. It allows them to log in anywhere that supports the Mydex ID, which is based on open standards, Mozilla Persona or the OpenID Connect. We can act as the identity provider for any organisation. That gets them straight out of the username and password business, which is costly and adds little or no value to an organisation. It's safer and better for the individual to build up their own identity. On top of that, they're looking for assurance or verification that the person is who they say they are. An individual with a Mydex ID, with a personal data store, is able to deliver proofs of claim about themselves. I have a driving licence, I live at a certain address, I earn a certain amount of money, I have the rights to these types of services. So identity services are a doorway to getting frictionless experience in how they engage with organisations. The other part of it that organisations are continually finding is challenging is, how do I distribute information to my customers, and how does the customer give me information? Many organisations have millions of pounds building portals that look absolutely fantastic, some look terrible, but they spend a lot of money trying to get people to turn up and fill in a form online or request a service by going to their portal. But people are just tired and exhausted of doing that. They just simply want to invoke a service. We've seen the explosion of smartphone apps. We've seen the explosion of people running their own services and tools where they want to initiate things from their space, where they live, in their environment, and actually be able to action things with the organisation organisations that supply them. So we provide a bi-directional exchange mechanism to send data from the organisation to the individual and from the individual to the organisation seamlessly without filling in any forms. And we call it a digital letterbox because it's a useful way of getting people to think about what it means, and we've seen lots of public sector organisations spending a fortune posting documents to people or refusing to use email because it's not secure and they don't know it's genuinely received. In our model, the relationship between the individual and the organisation is sacrosanct, it's secure, it's encrypted, it can be guaranteed to be delivered to the individual's personal data store at the heart of it where they collect this information. That's a very powerful message. It also makes it really easy for an individual to change something about themselves, like their mobile phone number or some preference or intention, and let everybody they're connected to know about it based on the rules that they've set up, the permissions they've granted. So they're implementing their wishes and desires automatically. The other part of this is that many organisations know a lot of stuff about individuals, and they could assert proofs of claim on behalf of individuals and say, David has a driving licence, David is insured, David lives at this address, David pays his bills on time. But of course they're not allowed to transmit that information to third parties legally under the Data Protection Act, not without the individual's consent. Building up systems that would actually allow those policies to be implemented and those consents to be implemented are terribly, terribly expensive and almost impossible to envisage when you're doing it in an organisation-centric way. What we enable an organisation to do is hand those digital certificates, those proofs of claim, back to an individual who can store them and distribute them when they need to. Now, this is a very empowering thing for an individual, but it also unlocks the information within organisations to be useful elsewhere. And what organisation doesn't want evidence that somebody's got right to work or is on benefits and entitled to a special energy tariff or whatever it may be? So there are lots of reasons why digital transmission of evidence is fundamentally an empowering thing for the economy. It can accelerate the way in which we operate as a nation, but for the individual it allows them to get stuff done without having to turn up with physical evidence in document form, go to the post office, have something stamped to say I've got a passport. It's all there, and it's technically possible to do today. The issue has always been there's never been a mechanism for an organisation to do it legally unless they hand it back to the individual. We've created a platform, a trust framework that allows that trust to be transferred from one organisation to another, but fully permissioned by the individual. So if you think of something as very sensitive as medical information, an individual can receive their medical information back from their doctor or any healthcare provider from whatever sector. They can store it, they can keep it, they can analyse it themselves, whether it's their exercise or blood test results or any other type of information. And when they need to use it for a purpose that they've decided upon, they can share it with somebody in a fully permissioned way. So hugely empowering. Now, the benefit of creating an ecosystem like ours, where the individual is acquiring this stuff from organisations, is that they can distribute it and aggregate it as they need to get things done. That saves organisations an absolute fortune because they receive evidence from another organisation with a digital certificate that says it's true, so they can trust it. That, to me, changes the whole equation, the whole dynamic. The world suddenly moves on and becomes a much more empowered place that can move really fast at web time, as some people like to call it, although it's a bit racy for me. Applications is the third area. People want to innovate. We've seen many situations, both in the public sector and the private sector, where there are complex user journeys that have to be done by logging into multiple systems or some physical activities because you need to provide trust or evidence along the way. What we've enabled people to do through the application platform that we represent is to develop a customer journey or a user experience that's seamless, that's really simple, that works on behalf of the individual, thinks about the individual at the heart of what they're doing, and integrates with their personal data store and all of that personal data, and the platform then distributes the transactions and data to the different systems that are connected to the Mydex platform. It addresses the consent issue, it streamlines the entire processing for the organisation, and it means fundamentally that an organisation does not have to re-engineer what they might term as their strategic platform applications or their legacy applications, which are complicated, have a huge price tag over re-engineering, because they can innovate with the individual and create the right user experience. So these three areas combined together offer organisations a phenomenal return on investment, something between 45 and 76% drop in transaction cost. Now today you will not find that sort of return on investment calculation from buying a CRM system or an ERP system or moving the deck chairs around within an organisation. We are talking about a paradigm shift here in the way things get done. You're also implementing privacy by design. Your privacy impact assessments that organisations do can be directly mapped onto how you can implement new customer journeys and process flows. And above anything, it's completely transparent and the individual is in control of that entire process. So it's a win-win for the individual because they are in control, they have richer insight to their life, they're able to control the movement of information and get stuff done seamlessly. Now let's look a little bit more at application developers. We've spent a lot of time working with application developers. We have our own application developers ourselves that built the platform. And what they're looking at all the time is how do I reduce the risk and the cost of developing match-winning applications, whether they're on smartphones, whether they're on the web, whether they're things that reside on desktop PCs or they're multi-scale, multi-enterprise type cloud platforms. And they're constantly looking for trustworthy, hyper-secure ways of storing information where they don't carry the risk over personal data because that is a huge expense and there are increasing regulation around that. We chose to invest heavily in building a trust framework, an ISO 27001 platform that is designed to manage personal data in a privacy-friendly, individual-centric way. That's hugely attractive to those organisations. Data storage and security, we're using industry best practice. We've been very innovative around the way we've designed how data is stored. All personal data is uniquely encrypted by the individual. Mydex has no access to it, neither does the application developer, unless it's permissioned by the individual. So there is no implicit loss of control. Access to richer data sets. Wherever we go, people always want a little bit more information, and that's led to some quite bad practice. Data Protection Act talks about data minimization. Organisations over-collect because for fear that they'll need it later. In our model, the organisation collects exactly what they need, gets it just in time as they need to complete a transaction, but they can add and request additional access to information. The individual makes an informed consent about how they do that. It gets distributed through the API of our platform automatically into those applications, and it can provide an audit trail both for the individual that the permission has been granted, and it gives them the ability to switch it off should they become unhappy. So they're not stuck inside a system, and who hasn't tried to get themselves off a mailing list and the convoluted process. Sometimes it's really easy to sign up for things and it's incredibly hard to unsubscribe. And this actually gives them the control to switch it off wherever they wish to do so. But those richer data sets where you can start joining data sets together that might be useful. We've seen innovation around energy, around finance, where people are combining circumstance, personal financial position, energy consumption, and a whole range of different dimensions where they can start getting insight about their lives and find out ways that they can either save money, improve their effectiveness, and understand their lives better. So the insight area is a very powerful medium where people start to match data together. Application developers have got insights coming out of their ears about the way you can innovate if you get access to a rich personal data source. And with the permissions granted by the individual, they know exactly what they're doing and they get the benefit out of it, and it's transparent. The third area really is around no barriers to entry. We're a community interest company. We want this platform to scale. We want innovation to happen. Mydex is not an application developer in the traditional sense. We don't develop on top of our own platform. We just run the platform. We've published an open API with an open schema. We extend that schema at no charge if application developers come along with a good idea, and we'll add it to the schema of the personal data store. We've tried to make the documentation easy and simple to engage with. It's all web-based standards and people can just interact with it whenever they want to. We provided a sandbox for people to experiment with so that there is no charge for participation at the experimentation and investigatory stage. And we didn't want any barriers to participation. If you want to move on to production on the platform, that's when a fee goes, and it's a pay-as-you-go model. But let's get back to our core community, the people that ultimately we're trying to serve by building this platform and getting these organisations and application developers to connect. What do human beings fundamentally want in life? And we can think about Maslow's Hierarchy of Need and all sorts of other clever ways of describing it, but fundamentally, convenience and ease of use. People want to get stuff done. They want to apply for things, book a plane ticket, order some tickets for a show, analyse their travel, understand their health, manage their finances, apply for things, do all sorts of very basic transactions and get insight into what they're doing. Our platform enables them to do that with little or no data entry, because one of the things we learned through all the research that we did is just because you can store a thing doesn't mean anybody will bother. Transcribing stuff off paper-based documents or complicated electronic files is actually very difficult for people. People don't want to do that. So we built a platform that allows them to collect this information automatically as a byproduct of having a relationship with organisations. They want apps and tools. We've seen an absolute explosion of smartphone applications, you know, many of them free. Why are they free? People use them all the time. I have literally 40 or 50 applications on my own phone. Some of them are incredible utilities, some I pay for. I look very closely because we care about privacy. What am I giving up if I take a free application? And most of the time it's the analysis of your behaviour. It's an insight and understanding of what you do. And many people will give up privacy and give up those rights almost in the blink of an eye in order to get the functionality and the ease of use that they're craving. So we see a huge opportunity area for giving what we would call privacy-friendly, fully empowered applications a space to operate, whether on a smartphone or within inside our platform, that lets an individual become empowered and inspired and educated without giving up data rights. And if they're going to give up any kind of rights to their data, they will know about it in a completely transparent way, and we think that's a fundamental. And that's good for the organisation because it improves compliance, it reduces risk, it reduces any threat of exposure or investigation around bad practices around data minimisation. So we're privacy friendly in that regard. And it's just that simple ability to get tasks done. So we always have at the centre of our thinking the empowerment of the individual, but it won't work unless we connect organisations and give an environment for application developers to help individuals. So we like to summarise it as in any ecosystem or any model that you've got to have a win-win scenario for all the participants. Well, we've identified what we think are the key measurable benefits. There's the right thing to do, there's the moral thing to do, but there's the fundamental economics of this equation work for everybody. It delivers trusted identity. That's important for the individual as much as it is for the organisation and the application developer. It delivers cost savings for everybody. It's time savings, it's financial savings, it's transaction processing cost savings. It's reduced risk of fraud. You know, we live in a world where we're constantly scared about identity theft or loss of information about our lives. We created a trust framework where that is removed because you know everybody that you're interacting with. You have certainty that you're sending information to a person that's been verified by the Mydex platform. You can't, as an organisation, connect to our platform unless you can prove that you legally are who you say you are. And we're following the good practice guides that have been published by the government for that, as well as our own processes of verification of the identity of organisations. It increases insight and analysis for everybody. It's incredibly easy to change behaviour once it's visible to you. But sometimes the sheer effort of understanding what's going on is a barrier to change. So we think this is a hugely empowering model for us. It offers new income streams as well. There's much talk in the US around volunteered personal information, vendor relationship management, the Clue Train Manifesto, doc sales, people like that. We see that as something that may happen over time. Right now we're more interested in practical things that get stuff done, that restore privacy and control and reduce risk for organisations by allowing seamless digital transactions to occur. But data is valuable. If an individual is empowered to participate in that economy, and we've seen the World Economic Forum produce data, personal data, the new asset class, many reports, etc. They see the fundamental need within the work they're doing for a personal data store to exist and for an individual to be a participant. And that's where all of the law changes are going through Europe, through Data Protection Act, is to move human beings from being a subject of these things to being a participant. And we see that our role in that is to make that possible technically, commercially and legally as well. Speed, we all live in a fast moving world, mobile phones, digital transactions, emails, online commerce, etc. That deluge of transactions that we're involved in. I personally myself have 550 usernames and passwords. That's an unmanageable equation. I'm slightly nerdy, I have means to do it. The personal data store, the keychain that we have within there allows me to actually stop worrying about. That's part of our goal, is to make it seamless for me to move through the web with my identity protected and controlled. And above anything, increased convenience, increased utility for all of us. That's our mission. So that's the sort of preamble about why, but let's talk a little bit about what our platform is. Now, we recently completed a company-wide audit for ISO 27001 for an information security management system. It was arduous, it took a long while, it's been a year in the planning and the execution, but we have achieved that certification. And one of the hardest challenges was to come up with what it says on the certificate. And we spent endless time discussing it, and you try to reduce the quintessential components down. I have to read it because I can never quite get it right each time. Mydex's ISO 27001 certification should read: the provision of secure digital storage areas to individuals to enable them to manage their personal data and identity, which they can send and receive under their control with connecting organisations and applications they have authorised accordingly. It's a mouthful, but it's actually the most succinct expression of what we do. And we're constantly looking for easier ways to explain it. We're investing in work around visual metaphors with one of our key members of the team. In fact, later today there's a workshop on that as well, and it's just trying to understand how human beings think and how they cognify the movement of information. But if we move on from there, we look at this trust framework as a picture. You've got us in the middle with this hyper-secure environment, this ISO 27001 end-to-end company with service and infrastructure, with relying parties who are attribute providers, data providers, and also attribute verifiers, people who can assert the truth about yourself to you and give you evidence that you can use elsewhere. Think of it as DWP, think of it as your bank, think of it as your local authority, think of it as an application provider in one form or another. Anyone who's got data and evidence about you that they need either to receive from you or send to you. You've got Mydex members, that's what we call individuals because we think they've joined our trust framework. We're there to work for them, they belong to our program, they have decided to engage with us. They have a personal data service, that's the store, it's the application at the front that lets them view and manage and share and permission things. And then you've got application service providers that say, we've got tools and utilities that can work on your personal data on your behalf and help you get things done. Whether it's plan a holiday, understand your energy consumption, apply for a loan, be an independent advisor in some form. It could be your accountant, could be literally anybody. It might be your housing association is providing a service around financial management to support the transition to universal credits. It could be a third sector organisation that you participate with has given you tools as a collaborator in delivering some charitable volunteer work that you might do. It's, literally the scope is endless. I think there's 350,000 applications sitting on the App Store for Apple, many of which involve the use of personal data in one form or another. So the innovation is just vast. We want to make our platform that open environment where anyone who wants to innovate and needs to interact with individuals' personal data can do so in a very secure way. So we have a charter at the heart of the business. We have terms for members which set out very clearly their responsibilities, our responsibilities and obligations to them. We have terms for connections, which is what applications and relying parties connect to. They are written in plain English and transparent. We're constantly looking at expressing those in simpler terms, but they were written to work on behalf of the individual to balance that trust equation, because up to now the individual has not had a place or tools that actually let them work on an equal footing with the organisations that supply them. Up to now you've had to turn up and tick their terms and conditions. As all the research shows, nobody actually reads them. In our world, we're creating a common set of terms and conditions that you read once and understand, and at the heart of the sharing of information backwards and forwards is a thing called a data sharing agreement, and it sets out in precise terms the use case for the data that an individual is sharing with an organisation or with an application developer, the limits to the use of that, the data set that is being shared, the time limits that may go on with that, and there's a whole rich area of permissioning and control, so it's transparent. And this is where the privacy by design becomes possible, because the individual is in control, and the organisations connecting have to think through why they need the information and justify it to Mydex as they submit a connection request into our platform, because it has to go through certification and testing as a connection, and we will challenge anything that actually breaches data minimisation guidelines. And this is an ongoing area of importance that we feel to provide. Now, as we talked about before, 3 core services: this secure consumer digital letterbox, bi-directional exchange, the identity services again, and the application platform itself. Create new customer journeys, streamline process flows, and make it possible. Now, just as important as saying what we do, it's actually very important that we explain what we don't do. And because we are a platform and we're an open platform, there's a line. And that line says we provide the platform with an open API, with a connection fee. Organisations pay a connection fee for each customer they connect to. It's low cost, easy to operate. Individuals do not pay. This is not a freemium model from Mydex. This is completely free to the individual. That's the community we serve. We have no data rights for that. Now, the organisations that connect will need to integrate to our API, which is a standard RESTful API that runs on the internet. Now, they have existing advisors, consultants, service providers, existing teams of people. We do not provide business process outsourcing or business process re-engineering. We do not provide trusted advice or consultancy services to organisations. There's 2 reasons for that. One of them is it goes beyond our remit as a social enterprise. The second area is most of the organisations that we talk to, large or small, already have service providers, already have applications. We did not want to cross that line. We wanted to create a neutral platform that was equal for all. So we have put more effort into providing white papers, guidance, open documentation for consultancies, systems integrators, software developers, and people working in those organisations to allow them to understand the best way to integrate to our platform in a completely transparent way, and we've made it free for them to do it. There is no charge for experiment testing and access to the documentation, and we think that is an absolutely vital component of what we do. And as we said, it's free to individuals. There are no data rights. Implicit within that is our ongoing commitment to the education program and the development of the platform through a range of community engagement activity, both with the individual members and the community at large, about features that people would like to see, data attributes, and different education needs. And it's building that community. We have an emergency service running by that one day we hope will be fed by a personal data store, giving the right medical information to the emergency services on triage as they go by. But we can all dream that this will be seamless one day. But that's my segue to the sound interruption. For organisations and application developers, it's a low-cost connection fee, and it really is. It's 15p to connect a citizen, a single charge of £10,000 to connect a service into the platform, and thereafter 25% of that a year. So in real terms, it's 4p a customer per year. Send them as much information as you like, receive as much information from them as you would like. Now, that's a compelling equation, as one of the major government departments said to us. So what you're telling me is it costs me 40p to post a letter, print and post a letter, and that's one, and you're telling me for 4p a year I can send as many as I want. So I've effectively paid per citizen for 10 years worth of your service just by stopping sending one letter. And we say, yeah, it is that simple. And people look at you and go, there's got to be a catch, but there isn't a catch. It is that simple. We've designed this thing to operate globally. It works on the basis of individuals connecting to multiple organisations, and 4p from each organisation helps us fund the platform. And our goal is sustainability and continued investment. 65% of any profits reinvested in that social purpose. As we said, it's an open schema, it's a sandbox that people can experiment with. It's really, really simple to develop. You can look at our website, mydata.mydex.org, where application developers talked about using the sandbox and how that worked. You can look at the developer community website, dev.mydex.org, and it's all there available. You don't have to register to look, it's all available and publicly free. So let's come back to this individual perspective again. What do they actually get? What do they see? Well, they come in, they can register and become a member. They get a personal data store. It's a very straightforward and simple process. We ask for some simple bits of information. Pick your Mydex ID, which is a unique identifier that will be with you for the rest of your life. So think carefully about what you might have it be. But that becomes your identity on which you can link all other identities that you have to it when you choose to do so for your purposes. Nobody else gets to link them but you. You have to put in a single email address at the start if you wish us to be able to communicate to you, and as part of the registration process we need that email address to verify you the first time. You have to pick a password. And that says you've got an account with Mydex. But the really key thing that they have to do is pick their private encryption key, because only they can unlock their personal data store. And picking that private encryption key, which could be a phrase like "I wander as lonely as a cloud," encrypts it in a unique way because it's an individual personal data store. It's not a giant database. Mydex does not run a database of personal data. We run millions of small individual personal data stores, so we use cloud infrastructure but in a federated model. You could store your personal data store anywhere in the world. Today we offer it within our super secure data centers run under ISO 27001, but if you wanted to run it locally on your own machine, fully encrypted, you can. If you wanted to run it on somebody else's data center or in a mountain in Switzerland with your bank, you could do it. We provide the platform, but wherever you want to put that personal data store, that's your choice. And we will switch that on as we get to the scale of the service. But right now, most of the research has shown that people love the idea that it's their little personal data store. We don't have any rights to it. It's not a big database, and they don't really know where they'd like to put it themselves. So we're putting it in a super secure data center, which we've got ISO 27001 certification for hypersecurity. And we even have to go and check the locks and pull the cables out and prove it all works. So we're running it at scale. Now that application environment allows them to set up in a hypercard way. There's sort of tabs and view them, whether they're transactions, my bank statements, my call history, my blood test results, my Fitbit exercise information, or really basic stuff like my national insurance number or my passport details, and attached to that evidence and proof of claims that those things belong to you. And that's the important part, and it's your place. Nobody else ever goes in there. Nobody else ever sees it but you. When you decide to share, you effectively create what we call a shard, which is a uniquely permissioned subset of it, which you're sharing with an organisation individually. Could be your accountant, could be, and it's actually in a separate encrypted area that only they and you can get into. So it's not them getting into your personal data store. It's a copy of the data that you permissioned, and we manage the movement of that information in and out of the shard in encrypted form. Everywhere the data goes, it's encrypted. Whether it's coming up to your browser or whether it's going across the network, it's encrypted. It's encrypted twice in your personal data store, and you can store transactions, you can store just data about your life, data that changes over time, as opposed to transactions that build up over time. There is no real theoretical limit to the size of your personal data store or the dimensions of your life that you would like to keep information about. Whether it's preferences, intentions, health, volunteering. It could be something as simple as credentials management. What rights have I got? What evidence do I have about that? What consumption activity? What views, opinions, likes or dislikes? What terms and conditions I'm under contracts on? It could go further and talk about your health and social care. Huge challenges there that we see with organisations who need to share information across multiple healthcare and social care providers. It needs a lot of consent, it needs very careful control, and the individual needs to be there. It could be network culture and art, looking at the work we're doing with people like the BBC to help people navigate a digital public space space and capture their experience and annotate it and record it. It could be your educational and professional examination results. It could be your continuing professional development. It could be a history of all of your purchases. I know many of these e-commerce vendors like Amazon keep records of everything you've purchased, and you can certainly find out what's on your wish list there and what you spent. Sometimes clunky to get involved in it, but it's only one tiny shard of your purchase history. With a personal data store, you can look at the entire purchasing history of your life and actually analyse it and allocate it and fit it into budgets and do other things. Tax and benefits. You know, we're moving to universal credits. That's where the individual contract with a citizen, with the government, needs to be enshrined digitally by default. If you could actually carry the certificate that said you had universal credits, what your entitlement was, you could get things done across society in a seamless and easy way. So that digital letterbox, the bidirectional exchange, terribly important. So if we just dig a little bit deeper, human beings' lives, whether you realise it or not, and as you get older it gets more complicated for a while and then might get simpler, but there are many, many data points in your life. And no wonder it's daunting when you try to organise it, whether it's in a filing cabinet or a tray, or whether it's personal information you keep in a spreadsheet or whatever. The goal we have for the individual is to help them collect it and organise it and structure it and share it when they need to, but keep it safe, keep it private, and give them the control and consent about how it's shared. And that's the fundamental thing that we're about. Remove the barriers to transactions, increase the level of control and privacy, so that all of these wonderful initiatives that come up around sharing information, we see the data strategy group from the UK government wanting to make lots of public sector information available and start moving over that line from open data, as they call it, to pseudo-anonymised personal data. Very worrying area, because actually there's a mechanism for them to hand it back to the individual. Let the individual decide if they wish to participate in medical research, or if they wish to participate in sharing information about their tax affairs or their benefits or payments they receive as a farmer from DEFRA or whatever it may be. You know, give the individual the control. Let them participate. Convenience will ultimately trump many other factors in people's life, but ultimately it should be their choice. So a personal data store, no matter what the dimension of your life, is there to help you for your entire life. So it's a longitudinal record of your life. And we've seen people like Facebook build things called timeline apps where you can see what you were doing at given times. That's fine, but that's data owned by them. It's not owned by you. This is a place where you can have similar capabilities to understand your life, but at a much richer and deeper level. It's not just your social stream, but it's your financial stream, your health stream, your personal circumstances stream that you can look at and analyse. And that's our vision for how it helps you understand your working life and your private life. So the platform in operation really comes down to creating secure encrypted transactions between individuals and organisations across the platform, completely under their control. Whatever suppliers or organisations, public or private sector it may be, whatever type of data it might be, the individual fundamentally is sitting in control of it, making choices about what they share, how often they share it, and whichever way they share it. Whether it's electronically on a one-time use because you're trying to book a holiday or get a comparison on insurance, or whether it's a regular update to do with your pension fund where you want people to always know where you are and keep them up to date as you move around. So moves and changes. Changing, one of the use cases people always come up with, doesn't happen terribly often for many people, but moving house is a bit of a nightmare. With a personal data store, you can implement that, plan it and execute it through a simple set of utilities. Now, if you're a student or you're a local authority living in a university town, you've got an influx and outflux of people every year, and you have to deal with that. This is where huge cost savings. If you're involved in social care, you're involved in charitable sector, you're a bank trying to restore trust in the relationship you have with your customers. You need to be able to move information in a safe way. And people have created barriers to entry about online services that people just are getting switched off by. Too much complexity getting access to your own money or own information. People not turning up at portals anymore. You know, I heard somebody only this week say, I've stopped using my online banking system, it's too complicated, takes too much time. I now fax them instructions and it costs them a fortune to do, but I feel some way vindicated. The UK government went through a process of looking at identity cards, decided that was the wrong thing. Campaigns like No to ID came up and pointed out the fundamental problem with giant databases. So we've seen a sea change in thinking. We've seen a new efficiency and reform group come on and start talking about how society might change. And at the heart of that is identity. So the government have created an identity assurance program where individuals can acquire a trusted digital identity for themselves. They went out to procurement and said, we want an economy of people that can provide identity services for individuals. Mydex is the only community interest company, micro SME, to have been successful. The others are large organisations you might imagine. But the way that platform works is that an individual can pick any one of the 8 identity providers to be their representative for assurance about their identity when they go to access government services online. It will replace the government gateway and the existing online service portals. Now that's quite exciting. Mydex decided to bid for that because we wanted the individual to be able to assert that for themselves. So all we've done is effectively create an application in front of an individual's personal data store where Mydex, the IDP, is permission to receive information from the individual in order to assert their identity on their behalf. What we've done is take a different approach. We're not using KBA type questioning techniques and giant databases that we've acquired or anything like that, because we just don't have those. We're simply asking the individual to provide us with the evidence they've got from the people that supply them, their housing association, local authority, bank, mobile phone company, with those digital certificates, so we can actually provide the assurance based on fact as opposed to a guess, and however good the guess is. So the government have specified GPG 45, which is a set of standards around how you assess the assurance of an individual with different profiles for citizen, money and living. Because a personal data store carries rich evidence across all of those dimensions, we're able to look at that data, get a level of assurance and assure people to the highest possible level. And we're really excited about what that means. We'll be one of the small ones at the start, but because we're connecting the nation, that's how we see it, and letting organisations interact with individuals, an individual will have a secure, persistent digital identity under their control for the rest of their life. And they will be using it every day of their life. Whereas in the old identity schemes, if you want to log into the government services, you might use it once a year. With this, it's your identity. The Mydex ID can have associated with it the government ID, your Mozilla persona, your Open ID Connect, and it allows you to log in anywhere where those standards are supported. And because you've got a personal data store with all your other usernames and passwords integrated into your browsing, you're also able to seamlessly log in using your other credentials that you've got, whether it's your Facebook ID or your Twitter ID or your Google accounts or whatever it may be. So it's saving you the time. You've got a hyper secure place for all of those to be stored. You've got it integrated into your daily living. So we're providing a service. It's going live this year in October 2013. Initially, the first relying party in government was going to be Department of Work and Pensions, but we're seeing organisations like HMRC, DEFRA, alpha projects coming up with experimentation with some of the local authorities that we're already dealing with, housing associations, credit unions, all manner of other people that are very interested in helping individuals actually get things done in a seamless way. So we're very proud to have been successful. We bid in open procurement with everybody. We're a small organisation, went through the same rigorous evaluation everybody else did, and was successful. And we're very proud of that achievement as a small company. Now, platform essentials, for those that like the buzzwords, I'll run down them for you. It's a scalable community cloud infrastructure. It's multi-tenant, it's hyper-secure in bomb-proof data centers with dual data centers. Outside the blast radius of a 747, should it crash, it can seamlessly move to the other data center. We're IL2, we could move to an IL3 environment should we need to, but we don't need to because we do not hold personal data ourselves. We have no big database, we just manage lots of files that are encrypted by individuals. We are ISO 27001. We're also a member of OIX, and we're a registered trust framework with them, and we will also be T-Scheme assured as part of the government programme. We've been OIX and T-Scheme members for some time. Everybody has a unique identity, whether it is the individual, whether it is the organisation connecting, whether it is the application that is running against the platform. Everything is unique. We keep logs of the transactions that move backwards and forwards in encrypted form, but we have no knowledge of any of the data that moves backwards and forwards. It's an entirely blind, secure service. We designed it that way so that trust was implicit. Everything is encrypted with a 256-bit encryption. That's the personal data store. We use HTTPS to transmit. Inside the HTTPS tunnel is encrypted data packets that are uniquely encrypted between the receiving organisation and the sending individual, and vice versa. So even if somebody were able to intercept that data packet, they would need the private key from both ends if they wish to decrypt any information. It's completely blind to us. A PDS, as I said before, can be stored anywhere. If you want it on your own PC or your own server or your own personal preferred area. It's a federated data model. If you want to run multiple personal data stores and store different things in different ones, you could do that too. We're about giving you the ability to link it. We don't store videos, we don't store photos, we don't store program objects or anything like that, because we think there are specialized data stores for that. What we do allow you to do is store the metadata about those and embed them within your personal data store and control permissions against those. So we've designed the platform to be scalable, to be extensible. We think multi-factor authentication, which has got some high prevalence in secure areas like banking, is something that we could add to the platform as an option for people. One of the things that we've seen is a lot of financial services organizations very keen to get out of the multi-factor authentication business because it's very costly for them. Better that the individual has their own multi-factor authentication that they're in charge of. We were fortunate enough to participate in a technology strategy board project that investigated how voice biometrics could be integrated into a multi-factor authentication environment using mobile phones. It's very successful. It's pre-production, but we've got all of that on our roadmap, but at the moment we're still working on the basis of username or Mydex ID, password and the private encryption key, but we can extend it. PKI is implicit in the way in which information is exchanged across the platform. We use SAML for the government ID program, OAuth for other areas. We support OpenID, Mozilla Persona. We've even looked at and experimented with UMA as a way of managing the control of permissions for content stored out on the internet, but we felt when we did the research on that UMA wasn't quite ready for production scale, but we continue to watch that. We have a RESTful API. We can support JSON, XML and I believe YAML, not that I've ever used it myself. We are open source. The entire platform is built on open source technology. We contribute to the open source community. We've obviously configured it uniquely and we have some innovations inside that area. But the whole idea was to build this as a community organisation that was built on open source and not dependent on any commercial organisation for its success. It's standards based, it's totally UK designed, developed and operated, although we do have other people working in other countries on our behalf. In terms of the simplistic view of the platform, multiple personal data stores, uniquely encrypted transactions across the cloud, the internet, everything is uniquely identified. We are completely browser agnostic, device agnostic and operating system agnostic. So any device, any operating system, any browser people can develop in. You can use native Xcode, you can use native Android environment, whatever you wish for developing applications. And we felt that that was vital. If you want to access your personal data store from any browser, you can do so. And we continue to have that open support at all times. Now, our platform is secure. We've working with a number of application developers and third parties that have an implicit need to store hypersensitive information. They don't want the responsibility and accountability, but they also need the individual to be a co-curator of that information to help maintain it. So a personal data store is a logical conclusion. We've designed it to be MyData compliant. The MyData program describes a thing called a MyData store under the control of the individual, possibly run by a service provider on behalf of the individual, but with no rights to it. That describes us perfectly. We're involved in the Creative Exchange Hub, which is looking at the digital public space and how people will start to use online services to navigate culture, media and art, and the first example of that is the work we're doing with the BBC. We worked with Swirl during the community prototype, who were building an open data bus that would allow you to integrate and mash up open data sources into a personal data store, whether it was train times, maps, who your local councillor was at all. And we are building an external integration hub that allows you to bring your social stream and those open data sources right inside your personal data store and mash them up is a phrase that people use, but actually make them an integral part of it and really let people climb on top of the information that's out there and build upon it without having to reinvent it. We also were interviewed by the BBC about what would we do about the census next time it came round. I think it cost 500 million this time. We think a census could be an enduring, ongoing and automatic thing, as would be the maintenance of your right to vote, which is simply a digital certificate, and we think we can strip out billions of pounds of cost in government services just by simply making the individual a participant. As we've said before, our focus is making the documentation readily available and simple, and we take constant feedback from our own developers and the developer community about the information they would like, any suggestions, and we're building out a developer community and engagement which is being moderated by the developers themselves so that we can actually help grow the API, grow the data sets, grow the schemas to meet the needs of both the individuals but also the communities that we serve. Now, what's interesting is literally in the last month the World Economic Forum produced its second major report around personal data, and it's called Unlocking the Value of Personal Data from Collection to Usage. And it's very timely because what they've come up with is quite a simple picture. We sort of hoped we'd invented it ourselves. We keep looking at simple pictures, but they recognise that there are organisations that want data about you, and there are organisations that have data about you. Now, in some cases, it's the same organisation, and they hold the data that they want from you, but they're not allowed to use it. So there are quite interesting issues here. But if you think about data handback, which we in the UK describe as the MyData programme, there's economic reasons why organisations should hand it back. The cost of doing a subject matter access request at the moment is astronomical and a waste of time. The cost of distributing bank statements and phone bills and all manner of communication, very, very expensive. And as we've said, 4p a year versus 40p per letter and rising. So we think the data handback side, they've put in the middle a thing called a personal data store. Now, I can tell you when we started with the World Economic Forum, this wasn't even on the agenda. It was all about personal data's valuable, how do we get it? Now it's actually, well, the individual has to be fundamentally involved, fundamentally permissioning and fundamentally consenting. And they've defined a personal data store as controlling that. And they've identified the MyData program, the Smart Disclosure program in the US. They've recognised that there's multi-dimensional aspects of your life, and then they've talked about the requesting parties either asking directly for the information or using an information broker of some form or another to seek and request that information, which is controlled and permissioned by the individual. So it's an absolute delight to us to see this coming in the right direction. Now, I've put the NHS on this slide as well because today there is a huge program underway to try and unlock the potential for medical research around personal health records. And you'll see that the commissioning board is doing a fair amount of work both with entrepreneurs and the developers of the GP practice software, etc. And fundamental to that strategy is the creation of an API within those GP systems available to the individual for the receipt and return of their medical records to them as an individual. Identity is fundamental in that. Mydex seeks to participate and play a part because we believe that sharing of medical information should only be done with the consent and explicit control of the individual. So it's an exciting development. It's obviously fraught with some tension because there is a history of pseudo-anonymisation, or a belief that it's too complicated for individuals to participate in. Our evidence and research shows that people understand personal data much better than people realise. They've become enabled, all stratas of society, in moving data around. So we think that is a very, very powerful development for us as an organisation, and also for individuals, and we hope that we can help steer that to a successful outcome. So that's the end of the sort of core of the talk that I wanted to give today, but it's about empowering individuals, but it's doing it in a way that makes sense, both for the individual, for the organisations that are going to provide the information, that want the information. Giving an individual the ability to assert their identity, to prove who they are, to prove what rights they've got, and to allow them to transact seamlessly across the internet with whomsoever they want, when they want to, in the format they need to, is our central mission. But we've got a massive economic argument in favour of doing that for government, for the private sector, for the third sector, and just about any stakeholder within that ecosystem. That's Mydex's mission. We hope people will join and connect. We have plans to grow very rapidly through 2013, 2014. We've had some significant successes in connecting key organisations, but we continue to seek new connections and new application developers. So thank you very much.